What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen, John McKechnie here. This is the betting edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Pod, talking Week 13, coming at you on Tuesday afternoon. So a lot to digest here, John. We got 3 games on Thanksgiving. We have the Black Friday game between the Raiders and the Chiefs, which is on Friday, as you may guess. And then still a full Sunday, Monday slate. No teams on bye in Week 13. Very, very much looking forward to breaking this down with you. And we'll start by taking a look at the Thursday slate. Giants, Cowboys, Dolphins, Packers, Raiders, Chiefs. I will say, John, none of these games made my initial card. I'll be focusing more on the Sunday slate. But which of these games really jumped out to you when you saw the opening lines?
I think I got to go with the Packers game. The Dolphins have definitely just been playing a much better brand of ball of late. We talked about them at length in last week's episode, and they certainly came through against the Patriots, and now they kind of get put to a test against the elements, and we know how that tends to go for this Miami team. I think they're 0-9 in their last 9 when kickoff has been at 32 or below. That's not great when you have to go to Green Bay in late November. So I'm a little bit worried about this Dolphins team here. And I know that the Packers, just kind of took care of business against a beaten up, shorthanded, however you want to put it, 49ers team. But I still believe in this Packers team. And I fear that despite the level of play that we've seen from the Dolphins of late, we might not be treated to the most exciting game to kind of round out the Thanksgiving slate.
Forecast right now for Green Bay around kickoff time on Thursday night. That is the final of the 3 games. 27 degrees, 11 mile per hour winds, a chance of some precipitation, which, as you know, John, if it's under 32 degrees, that precipitation would be snow. So we are looking at Packers weather here. I wonder if the Packers are a little bit overvalued coming off of that win over San Francisco. I mean, so many missing pieces for the Niners, beginning with Brock Purdy, but at the same time, I mean, the Packers could not have answered the bell more emphatically, right? I mean, that was a thorough beatdown from start to finish. We saw that turnover-happy defense return. I thought in general that was one of the best defensive games they played, not only this year, but in the last few years. And I know when it's Brandon Allen back there, it makes it a lot easier. But the Packers defense was flying around. I do think the absence of Romeo Doubs, assuming he's out, left with a concussion in Week 12, I think that could be big. He's their best possession receiver. Not having Jair Alexander for this game specifically, with Tua and Waddle and Hill and even Jonnu Smith all of a sudden, who is a real weapon for them. I think that could hurt, but like you said, I have no problem here if you want to essentially make the handicap. Tua is terrible in cold weather. It's going to be very cold in Green Bay. Yeah,
and I think the Dolphins generally are they're not a cold weather team. Like this predates even the Tua years. It's just they're not a team that migrates north for the winter and does particularly well. So I think that in front of the crazy, well, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the crowd on Thursday night? Are they going to be a little logy from their Thanksgiving tailgates, or is it going to be pretty electric in there?
No. If you're going to a Thanksgiving night game, I mean, you're detaching yourself from your family. You're going to be tailgating. No, the Green Bay crowd gets better and better as the season goes along, and this is not. To me, there's not a direct line of connection between Miami and Green Bay. Like, I don't think we're going to see a ton of Dolphins fans in the crowd for this one. If anything, people are going south for Thanksgiving. They're finding their family down in the Miami area. They're not coming up here. No, I think this is going to be a rowdy Green Bay crowd on Thursday night, especially coming off of that win. One thing I will say about Miami, by the way, just not a good running team. Not a good running team. And I don't think that is a recipe for success in this specific scenario. When you're talking about weather in the mid-20s, they have the weapons in theory to be a better running team than they have been, but it's been an issue for them all season long, whether Tua's been out there or not. I mean, their last 3 games, they've rushed for, as a team, 67, 82, and 65 yards. Those games coming against the Rams, the Raiders, and the New England Patriots, right? I mean, these are not fantastic run defenses by any means. So I think this points to a pass script for Miami, and I think that could be a potential recipe for disaster if Green Bay is able to get after Tua. Like I said, none of the 3 Thanksgiving games really jumped out to me. Detroit as a double-digit favorite against this Bears team that seems to be playing better, I should say, offensively over the last 2 weeks. That's more of a stay away for me, with lean Detroit, which tends to clean up at home in these games. And then Giants, Cowboys. I'm literally throwing up my hands. I don't know. I would lean Cowboys. I do think there's a reasonable chance, though, that DeVito doesn't start. Brian Dable said today on Tuesday that it's not 100%. He took a couple big hits, including one that officially knocked him out of that game last week against Tampa Bay. If I'm betting Dallas, I would rather see DeVito. I don't want to see Drew Lock.
No, because Drew Lock is like actually, a realistic NFL starting quarterback, whereas Tommy DeVito is more of just a fun joke. But like we said last week, like we have the Rizzler now. We can move on past this when it comes to DeVito. So, Lock would certainly be an improvement. I think it was a very stark realization what the Giants had last week against the Buccaneers, where the Buccaneers go in there and just completely mop the floor with them, even did the mocking celebration. Baker Mayfield, of all people. Oh, I can't believe that he would do something like that. I had to, shield my hypothetical child's eyes as he did the gesture.
Disgusting act.
Just raucous. But that game, usually for me, that's when I'm eating my Thanksgiving feast. So I'm good with that. I'm not going to have much in the way of FOMO during that game.
Anything on the totals here before we move on to the three games that we actually want to discuss here? Bears Lions is at 48.5. Giants Cowboys is all the way down at 37.5. And then we have Miami Green Bay at 47.
I could see the Miami Green Bay game. That feels like there's a little bit too much credit being given to the Dolphins offense here. And to your point about them and their lack of run game, if you look at their backfield and who's there, Devin Achane is their best option, of course. But in this type of game where you might want a little bit more north-south, you would like Jalen Wright to maybe get a little bit more involved in that if you're Miami. But beyond that, so I do like the under in the Green Bay game. I think that one ends up being a little bit lower scoring. Usually it's been a fool's errand to bet the really high totals for the Lions, but with the way that the Bears offense has been playing lately, if they can get into the 20s here, then I think we're looking at an over in the early window. So I do like the over 48.5 in the early one. I have no idea what to make of the Giants Cowboys one. I could see that game getting, a little zany, a little wacky, defensive breakdowns. Yeah, I'm throwing it out there, man. So I could see the over in the Giants Cowboys one, but I'm the least strong of that one. I think under 47.5 for Packers Dolphins would be my total play for Thursday.
I do want to issue an official apology, by the way, to anybody who had the under in the Cowboys Commanders game last week. That game was, I believe, 13-9 with like 5 minutes left, and in just over 5 minutes of actual game time, we had 5 touchdowns and a field goal. I mean, that is as bad of an underbeat as you're ever going to see. And obviously it ended up cruising way over to 60 combined points. I'm with you on the under on Miami Green Bay. I think it has to kind of follow your handicap of the Dolphins, right? If you think this is a spot where they struggle offensively, I don't know if Green Bay necessarily lights it up. Both Miami and Green Bay are top 10 defenses by EPA on the year. So that's the one that I would tell you on most would be the under 47. And I think we probably see a bounce back for that Detroit offense, which it's wild that scoring 24 points and winning by multiple scores, feels like a letdown for Detroit, but that's where they are right now. I mean, they only put up 24 last week and only had 10 points in the second half. I think, getting back to the Dome on a holiday, a big game every year for Detroit. It's going to be a game where Chicago has to keep up. Let's get to our 3 games, John. And I know you've already touched on this one, but I'll let you add anything you want on your first game, which is the Green Bay Packers, to cover this number.
Right, exactly. So I don't need to belabor it too much, but I'm doubtful on Miami in the elements. That's kind of the carrying factor here. I think the Packers defense this year generally, like the improvement from going away from was Joe Barry to the new defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. I think has really just completely changed that unit. The bringing in of Xavier McKinney has been absolutely massive for them. They can create turnovers. They're great with that. They have a fun pass rush as well. I don't think that the Dolphins trenches are really well suited in this particular matchup here to either generate much push in the run game or defend or keep Tua upright. So it could just be a really long night, a slog for this Miami offense. And then I think that Green Bay just knows how to get it done in these elements. And I think, we got a little bit of an appetizer of it last week with the way that Josh Jacobs was running. I can't say it's going to be quite as good as his 3 touchdown performance against San Francisco, but I think that we're getting to that part of the season where Jacobs is really kind of starting to heat up there. So I'm liking how this sets up for Green Bay.
Two things I'll add, and then we can move on to the rest of the slate. One, Joe Barry is on the Miami Dolphins staff as a defensive assistant, so something to keep in mind. I think that's a bad omen for the Dolphins. The Dolphins are also 30th at PFF in terms of tackling grade. Josh Jacobs himself forced 15 missed tackles alone last week against the San Francisco 49ers. So I think this should be another Jacobs spot for the Packers. I'm going to go to the Seattle New York Jets game, John, for my first play. And you can guess which side I'm going to be on here. It's not the New York Jets, who on the look ahead, I was taking a look last week on Sunday, while the games were going on, and some sites had some look aheads up. The Jets were slight favorites at home. We have seen a market correction, to put it lightly, over the last couple of days. I got it at 1.5 in favor of Seattle. It's now up to 2.5 at a lot of shops. Total in this game is 41.5. This is a full-on fade of the New York Jets. I know they're coming out of the bye. I don't know if that matters at all for this team anymore. I just could not be more out on the Jets. Seattle's defense has played significantly better over the last 2 weeks. You do always worry about the anemic Seahawks showing up, in any given week. You might get a defense that allows 40 points. You might get a defense that completely shuts down James Conner and the Cardinals rushing attack like it did last week. But I think Seattle has advantages here. The one thing I worry about is the offensive line play. They were able to get away with it last week, but there were still a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties for that offensive line. But this is one where if Geno Smith does not give the game away, we'll give him one interception. He could throw one pick. If he throws more than one pick or has more than one turnover, this is going to get dicey. But I think Seattle can go in, can kind of lean on the run, hit a couple big plays to DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba, get out with what could be another ugly win. There was a low total in this game for a reason. I mean, I see this as like a 20-13 type of game for Seattle, but with this under a field goal, I have to go Seahawks here.
Yeah, I think that's the right play. The Jets are the team to fade right now. I think, they're kind of like worse than last year, even though Rodgers was out. The defense just really has taken such a colossal step backwards. There's so much less than the sum of their parts at this point that you got to feel good about the Seahawks, and they've gotten healthy in the receiving core of late with DK Metcalf coming back, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think last I checked, is in the top 10 in receiving yards right now. So, I mean, and it's come on a couple of monster games, and you've kind of made this comment where the monster receiving season hasn't really happened for anybody this year other than, say, like Jamar Chase. So it's a little bit down league-wide, but JSN still certainly earning his keep. And, yeah, I just think that this is a Jets team that doesn't benefit from the bye necessarily. Like they have all the theoretical advantages. They're off the bye. They're the home team on the East Coast playing against a West Coast team on relatively shorter rest. Nope, I still like Seattle here, and I think there is something to be said for Mike Macdonald, where his defense didn't really stick extremely well his first season in Baltimore until a little bit later on in the year. It seemed like things were kind of coming together last week against a good Cardinals team that they themselves were coming off the bye. Seattle still managed to really shut down that Arizona offense, which obviously we know is better than that of the New York Jets. So, yeah, it's going to be hard to go away from the Seahawks here.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets are just a dead team. Seattle has plenty to play for. They're technically in first place right now in the NFC West, but that feels like a division that's going to come down to Week 18. So I think they'll be focused. I do worry about the cross-country trip, but at the same time, do the Jets even have a home field advantage right now? It's like that almost feels like they don't want to be at home, because when they get off to these slow starts, they start getting booed. The crowd gets a little restless. Like it almost turns into this like home hostile environment for the Jets. So that doesn't really scare me away. And Aaron Rodgers also isn't 100%, right? I mean, weird reports over the last couple of weeks about him dodging the injury report, not wanting to find out how injured he is. There's reports that he might not even make it through the season. It's like, I love fading teams in these situations. The Jets have had their opportunities to get up off the mat and save the season, and they've blown every single one. I don't think that happens this week. All right, where are we going for your next game?
We are going to Cincinnati, where the Bengals and the Steelers will be squaring off. This will be Pittsburgh's second game in a row in the great state of Ohio. Bengals 2.5-point favorites here, and you look at the records and you'd say, why would that be the case? But the Bengals, I feel like I'm a broken record on this podcast. I'm always believing in them, and oftentimes they let me down at home. They've been awful against the spread, 1-4, I think the number is. So, to be fair, that there hasn't been a lot of reason to back them in these particular spots. This is the first time these two are squaring off this year. But I just think that Bengals offense in light of how bad the defense is, and I'll get to that momentarily, I think that Bengals offense is still just a huge problem for any defense to go against, no matter how good. And the Steelers certainly qualify in that respect, but I still think that this is a run game that can get going a little bit, and then of course T. Higgins and Jamar Chase with the level at which Joe Burrow is playing right now, it's gonna be hard to keep them under 24 points here. And I think for as vulnerable as the Bengals defense may be, are we really that sold that Russell Wilson, like, it feels kind of crazy in retrospect that we were like this sold on the Steelers offense just because they had moved from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson. It's just like now they kind of have a baseline sort of normal looking offense, but it's not a particularly good one, and not one that I think it is going to like necessarily exploit all the weaknesses that the Bengals defense have shown over the course of the year. So I think this ends up being the type of game that the Steelers don't want to be in, where they have to keep up on the scoreboard. And therefore, I gotta lay the wood here within the division and say that the Bengals kind of that they officially kind of established themselves as that frisky team going into December that the people are a little bit worried about if they're on the schedule.
I like this call. I mean, this is a firm stay away for me. I had this noted down as my biggest stay away of the week, so I can't sit here and say I'm like totally with you on Cincinnati, but at some point they got to win a close game, right? And this team is way too talented to be sitting where it is right now. I'm with you. I think if they win this one, that narrative is going to ramp up, and it's going to be, oh man, nobody wants to play the Bengals right now, and it still feels to me like they're going to find a way to get in. I know every week it feels like they take a loss, and you're like, well, that's going to be the final straw. But things have kind of broken their way, I think, with as far as the AFC wildcard standings go. The Denver Broncos are going to be the team that they need to beat out, right? And I think Miami was in that conversation as well. If Miami loses to Green Bay, like we think they will on Thursday, I think that cracks the door open for Cincinnati. And, I'm pretty sold on this Denver team at right now. At the same time, they play the Bengals straight up in Week 17. And that could ultimately be the determining game as far as which of those teams gets in as an AFC wildcard. But this basically becomes a must-win for the Cincinnati Bengals. I trust Joe Burrow in the spot more than I do Russell Wilson. I also think, they played half the season without T. Higgins. And I know it's not like it's an automatic win when T. Higgins is out there, but I think this takes an already dangerous offense to an even higher level. And, we've started to see some cracks, some concerns, I think, with that Steelers team over the last couple of weeks. So I like your call there. Cincinnati -2.5. I'm going with a dog for my second pick. I am taking the Tennessee Titans to cover 5.5 on the road at the Washington Commanders. And I think this is going to be a popular dog play. I am really trying not to lean too hard into the recent narratives here. You're kind of fading Washington when it feels like they're starting to drift away a little bit. You're buying high on Tennessee. They cover for the first time in forever. I get that. I think this Titans team has been stealthily playing better than you might think over the last month. Really, Will Levis has kind of turned things around. I think this run defense has been one of the best in the league all season long. They are 4th in rush defense EPA on the season. And what has Washington been doing to teams? When Washington's having success, they're doing it on the ground. And that running game has really started to slow down over these last couple of weeks. I know they were up over 100 this past week, but a lot of that was Jaden Daniels. He ran for over 70 yards. And you could do that against the worst running defense in the NFL in the Dallas Cowboys. You have a completely different matchup now this week. And it was concerning to me that game came down to what it did at the end. And, credit to Washington, I suppose, for being an extra point away from likely forcing overtime. But at the same time, that Dallas defense is so bad. I mean, there was a reason that Washington was a 10.5 point favorite and was trailing for basically the entire game. You're going to face a much different defensive test this time around. And I don't know if they're going to have either of their running backs. Austin Eckler went out late with a concussion, his second of the year. Brian Robinson was injured 2 separate times last week. I think it's a pretty reasonable chance that at least one, if not both of those guys are out. They also had 2 starting offensive linemen go out with concussions. Their starting center and their starting right tackle. So pretty significant injury issues here for Washington. Tennessee just finds ways to generate these big plays every week, whether it's Nick Westbrook-Akina or Calvin Ridley or Chig Okonkwo, who rose from the dead for a 70-yard touchdown out of nowhere last week. I like what Tennessee's doing here. I don't know if they win outright, but I think this could be a field goal game.
I think it's going to be close too. Another thing that has been kind of bandied about this week in the football world is, Cliff Kingsbury had done such a good job. Like, everyone was like, he had turned over this new leaf and kind of had gotten away from his old tendencies and kind of fit the system to the players. And obviously it paid great dividends through the first half of the season and when Washington was rolling. But, since Daniels went down with that rib injury, he hasn't really looked the same. And I think the offense has struggled. And like you said, if they can't run the ball, which we have reason to suspect that they might not be able to here, not only because of the matchup, but the personnel reasons on Washington's side, you get a one-dimensional Washington offense that really only has one extremely reliable target in Terry McLaurin. And he can get you a lot of the way there, but he can't get you all the way there by himself. So that's a concern, especially when Daniels hasn't played as well of late. And then, Tennessee, if deep shots are kind of their forte, just landing one or two of those haymakers a game, Washington's the type of secondary that will allow that. They are very vulnerable to the big shot play. I think Ben St. Juste has been picked on a decent amount. We still haven't seen Marcus Lattimore, who they traded for. That's looking worse by the week. I don't know if he's practicing yet. So it's not like help's on the way here for Washington. And it seems like they're a little beleaguered on offense. Trouble spot for them.
Yeah, the Lattimore thing is a good point. Yeah, kind of forgot that he just hasn't played for them at all. There's been no update as far as this week goes with his hamstring injury, but got to think that's 50-50 at best. And the final thing I'll say about this is the way you beat the Titans, or the way the Titans beat themselves every week, is turning the ball over and just handing points, handing drives to the opponent. Washington it's not really a turnover-happy defense. They've only forced 11 turnovers on the entire year, and 7 of those have been fumbles. They only have 4 interceptions. It's not a defense that really preys on quarterbacks like Will Levis. So I think this is a pretty good spot for Tennessee. Your third game, John, where are we finishing out?
We're going to prime time, a game that you wish was setting up a little bit better than it is, but right now we got the Buffalo Bills 6.5-point favorites against the San Francisco 49ers. We're kind of waiting to see what's up with Brock Purdy on the San Francisco side of the ledger. Obviously missed last week, was throwing on Monday, so I think that there's at least some faint hope as we record that he'll be back under center for the 49ers. But even still, this is a 49ers team that I know that I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, like saying all these good things about a Bengals team that has a bad record, while also kind of being punitive towards the 49ers when they have a better record. But when are the real 49ers going to show? Like, how much longer are we going to wait for them to look like the team that people expected them to be? They had the highest win total coming into the season. I think at the very, very opening of the Super Bowl odds, they were the favorites, not the Chiefs. And they haven't looked like that at all this year. And I know that injuries play a factor, but I think at the same